Can I ask you, Topher? I'm not familiar with the press situation in Victoria. Those of us in South Australia, the only information source we could rely upon, obviously none of the television channels, nothing associated with the ABC. The Australian, from time to time, though its coverage of the matter was ad hoc and curious. The only information source we had was brave Avi Yemeni.
Look, broadly speaking, in terms of a member of an actual media organisation, he would be one of the top ones. I will, however, say, Peter Credlin did some very good work. She really turned the heat onto Daniel Andrews in a number of press conferences, asking very pointed questions.
Yes.
And also, there is another journalist who I don't care for her work overall. Her name will come to me. She actually featured in the documentary Battleground Melbourne, because she did actually come out with some very, very tough questions. And she can be very tenacious when she wants to be. If I think about, or if you're watching and you know who I'm
Dale, is that?
No.
Her
name will come to me, or someone will be prompted. It was in the documentary Battleground Melbourne. And so there have been one or two individuals. However, they've been, Lee Sales. Thank you, James. Lee Sales did some excellent work along the way. But it's been the exception and not the rule. But there are some others that definitely deserve a shout out. And in particular, during the worst of it, that would be Rukshan Fernando. Now, he's a wedding videographer who simply grabbed a camera and started live streaming and documenting what was happening. And he at times would have hundreds of thousands of people watching his live streams, while the news had maybe 2,000 people watching their live streams of the same events, Channel 7, Channel 9, etc. Which was very, very heartening. And I believe there was a period of time there where I think he was the single most important person that we had on the streets.
Look, I heard his name mentioned. I watched the documentary the other night. It was a wonderful experience to watch it. And I heard that name mentioned, and I thank you for reminding me. I'm going to look at that particular journalist's work. These people need to be honoured. They can hold their head up high. Such rare figures, such isolated figures in what used to be a profession. I'm not sure whether it even qualifies for the description of profession anymore. They were stenographers, weren't they? They were stenographers for Andrews. They were stenographers for the premiers. They asked with these very rare exceptions you're mentioning, they asked no questions of any substance at all. Look, can I tell you the thing that really, it actually shocked me that I'd forgotten it until I watched your documentary the other night, was the reaction to the builders' labourers demonstration against Setka. I thought you, if I may say so, I thought you covered that aspect of the experience very well. But that was a grassroots, working class, unpremeditated desire to protect the freedom of their bodily integrity and their other rights. And Setka is manifestly a bad actor in this. Well, he's a bad actor too, to the extent that I think everything he's doing is a pretense. But he's a bad player. He's playing an evil role in this. He was persuaded for reasons which no doubt will come out in the fullness of time, to back Andrews when he knew perfectly well that the massive 95% of his membership didn't want him to do it. He confronted them. He persisted in his support of Andrews. That was something that captured the imagination of all Australians, because builders, labourers are pretty robust individuals. This wasn't the usual objects of VicPol scrutiny and brutality. This wasn't old ladies or sedentary people. These were people who could fight back. And it really was a challenge, wasn't it? It really was a moment where a lot of the hopes, not only of Victorians, I'm sure, but all over Australia, were brought to bear upon this issue. We wondered what would happen over the next couple of days. The anti-terrorist police forces were brought to the streets. and I'm sorry to, let's just, again, and if I may, while I have this opportunity, let's just pause, and all of us who are communicating here tonight, let's just think about that. What an extraordinarily disturbing event for this first manifestation of. It wasn't the first manifestation of opposition to Andrews, but it was the first manifestation of an opposition that wouldn't be snuffed out by the brute force of the police force that seemed to be compliant with all of his wishes. And the anti-terrorist forces were brought to the streets.
Yeah.
I still don't, because the international travel has been so limited, and because the Australian media is so impoverished of international feeds and proper international journalism, I don't think Australians or Victorians understand the significance of that moment. That's something as much as the police invasion of that young pregnant lady in Ballarat.
Zoe Bueller.
That's even more than that. That's something that captured international attention. We won't forget it. I'm sure you don't forget it, and your documentary will ensure that generations of Melburnians won't forget it. But this is something that if you care about the sacrifices that your forebears have made to present you with a social dispensation that enables you to live in a civilized and neighbourly way whilst exercising your own personal freedoms and expressing your own views. If you have any kind of allegiance to your heritage, these events, and that one in particular, are deeply disturbing. And for the Victorian populace not to rise as one when they saw, look, Topher, I don't know psychologically how you, and I'm talking about you personally, how you process that. I know you were there from these demonstrations at the beginning. You were there with 500 people at your first?
No, the very first one we had 70 people. Yeah.
And so you saw the progression. This must burn itself deep into your psyche, and it will manifest itself in every aspect of your life hereafter, I suspect. But why isn't that happening with more Melburnians? What have they? It can't be that they haven't. It can't be that they're unfamiliar with what happened. I mean, even the mainstream media covered this event, this suppression by brute force of muscular unionist opposition. They know what went on. Why doesn't it? This is the really disturbing thing, isn't it? Why doesn't it just strike a spark deep within their souls that this something fundamentally going on here that's wrong and must be addressed?
I am of the view that, and I say this as a 39-year-old Australian who fits the description of what I'm about to give. Okay, so I'm not having to go at anybody else. This is me. We have had it far too easy for far too long. If you look at Australia, anyone that was born here or came here as a youngster, we haven't seen a war on our shores in our lifetimes. We haven't seen a genuine economic downturn in our lifetimes. Yes, the recession we had to have sucked for the adults at the time, but if you're my age or a little bit older, you were only a youngster at the time, and it really was lost on you. You didn't, everything that's happened since then, the global financial crisis, the dot-com bubble, the Asian crisis, all those things haven't really touched us here. We've skated through everything very, very easily. And I think now there is a lazy entitlement. There is a sense in Australian culture that we're the lucky country, we have it good, and we will always have it good. We're free, we're prosperous, life is good, and life will always be good. We've completely lost touch with what you touched on before, the sacrifices that were made by previous generations to give us the prosperity that we have today. The cost in blood, in the dedicated work and risk and danger undertaken by people over thousands of years of political history and the last 100 years and 150 years of Australian history to give us this heritage. And we take it completely for granted. And I think that's the explanation.
Look, I think you're on the money there, and the paradox that, or the impertinence that at some level Australians still like to see themselves as a larrikin culture and compare themselves favourably with what they see as the more reserved and conformist British. Well, Australian culture, that just for any Australian who still is clinging to that notion, Australian culture is the antithesis of a larrikin culture. Sadly, it's profoundly conformist. It's a profoundly conformist culture. It's neck and neck with New Zealand, and I was going to say New Zealand and Canada, but the Canadians have sprinted down the straight. It's neck and neck with the New Zealanders as to who's going to finish last in the moral integrity stakes in terms of nationhood. And I just call upon all Australians listening to this to have a think about reflect themselves on what they think has led to this present dispensation. It's been an illness that's been expressing itself in all different kinds of symptoms over the years. One thing that I often raise in conversations with my mates, look, I have to say with some former mates, these are people who are quite content to mask, and social interaction with them has stopped, let me tell you, over the last 12 months. But when we were talking, I would ask them to have a think about why is it that this sporting body that they seem to laud and is the centre of their national celebrations, their cricket team. Have a look what's pervaded the Australian cricket team over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Have a look at the behaviour. Have a look at the cheating. Have a look at the sledging. Have a look at the just in the recent change of captains. One captain goes out for encouraging ball tampering. Another captain comes in and is kicked out for sending pictures of his penis to some woman to whom he's not married. I mean, what does it take for Australians to confront the ugliness of the state to which they've allowed their culture to descend?
And can I just make the point here? I have never met a woman in all my life that wants pictures of your penis. Not even my wife wants to pick up her phone and have that as the message that she just received. I do not understand the culture in which that happens. It is just completely foreign to me.
Yeah. Well, so look, I mean, that's it's an example unrelated to our present discourse, but look, even as these sort of things were unraveling in Australian cricket over the last 20 years, I had mates who'd blithely continue to live out this myth of the brave larrikin Australians taking on the Poms. What a joke! What a complete lie, myth, a myth of the worst kind, a myth that doesn't inspire us on to better and more generous behaviour. What a shocking lie and myth it has been, this Australian larrikin spirit. It's dead and gone. And if someone has to pronounce the last rites in it, Topher, I'm happy to do it here on your show tonight. If it's going to assist Australians in waking up. But my question is, what aren't Australians prepared to put up with?
This is the question now. Anyone that hasn't drawn the line yet, is there a line for them? Is there a point where they would ever actually draw the line? I had a very uncomfortable realization about someone, relatively close to me in the family sense. We don't know each other well, but we know each other, and had the uncomfortable realization that if they had been born in Europe in the 1920s, then they would have stood on the guard towers at Auschwitz and watched what happened in front of them. And then they would have gone to church on Sunday and sung their songs and said their prayers and gone home and made love to their wife and still considered themselves to be completely the good guy. And there was a comment that was put up earlier, and I'm researching this more and more because this is something that has been very well understood historically and we've clearly lost touch with, that it is necessary for each and every one of us to be morally assessing the laws that we obey, not simply obeying the law and saying, well, they must have thought it through. The people that wrote the law are morally responsible. No. We are morally responsible for the choices that we make, including the laws that we obey. And I'm not wearing it tonight, but I have a slogan and a T-shirt that says, good people break bad laws. And that's my kind of modernized paraphrasing of this theme that we see, whether it's from Martin Luther King, whether it's from Abraham Lincoln, whether it's from the Eureka Stockade, whether it's right back to philosophers of 2,000 years ago. This understanding that there comes a point where you have to draw a line and say, no, I'm not going to do that because it's wrong. But we seem to have lost that now. We don't, in our culture, we just don't seem to have it.
Well, did we ever have it? Did we ever have it except under the aegis of British sponsorship? Now, I'm saying something that'll rankle with a number of, and I hope it does. I hope it does rankle with Australians, because I'm challenging them. I was born in Britain. I've been a permanent resident here and very privileged to have been so. But did we ever have it? I mean, it's whilst serving under British command in World War I and principally in World War II that the myth, in this case a noble myth, a myth which was foundationed on reality, the myth of mateship under battle was born. Okay, well, that's gone now. That British overlordship of our culture and our institutions has gone. Well, did our courage, did our heart, did our character go with it? I think it did, and I'm sorry if that offends. I'm deeply sorry if that offends those diggers who have served with distinction. But surely they must be asking that question themselves.
I know very many diggers who are.
Street or Swanston Street or King William Street in Adelaide or George Street in Sydney, and you confront these seas of masks when anyone with a modicum of intelligence knows that these masks are utterly ineffective at preventing the transmission of this disease. The level of compliance, the absence of spirit, it's a profoundly disturbing phenomenon, Topher. Look, maybe you had it worst of all in Victoria. Of course, your experience over the last 2 years has been by an order of magnitude worse than we've had in South Australia and any of the other states, save perhaps Queensland and Western Australia on occasions. But perhaps you're still recovering from it.
I certainly am individually. You asked earlier, how do you process that? And the answer is with great difficulty. And I was hopeful that making the documentary would have a somewhat cathartic effect, sort of going back through it and reprocessing it. And I would say it probably had the opposite effect for me personally. That was a difficult 4 months making that. So for me, I think it's gonna be quite some time before I can really get any distance from it. And I know I'm not alone in that. There's a lot of Victorians that have either left or are still here, but have come to loathe the place that they loved. I mean, I used to travel quite a lot before the borders got closed, and I had a saying that was one part funny, but actually serious at the same time. The more I travel, the more I like Melbourne. Right? The more of the rest of the world I see, the more I like coming back here. I mean, it is a truly remarkable place. No offense to the rest of Australia, but Melbourne holds a special place in my heart. It's been my home for almost every year of my life. But the magic is gone. And I didn't leave Melbourne. Melbourne left me, and that's certainly how I feel and how I think a lot of other people feel as well.